It appears the BYU football program is closing in on their starting quarterback decision, and could he follow the path of last year's championship quarterback in the Big 12? We're talking about it, a crossover edition of Locked On Cougars and Locked On Sun Devils.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars and Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast covering the BYU Cougars and the Arizona State Sun Devils. I'm Jake Hatch, host of Locked On Cougars. That across from me digitally is Richie Bradshaw, host of Locked On Sun Devils. Make sure you subscribe to both of our shows on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast, because, we like to talk all things college football. We like to keep our jobs, obviously, and keep doing our thing here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where, of course, the motto is your team every day. All right, Richie Bradshaw, I want to pose a question to you. It looks like BYU is closing in on naming freshman Bear Bachmeier as their starting quarterback. Well, you happen to watch a quarterback who was a freshman just a season ago lead your team to a Big 12 title game and also, obviously, a college football playoff berth. What do you think the chances are that BYU can recreate the magic that Arizona State had last year with Sam Leavitt and Bear Bachmeier?
Well, what's so fascinating about the Sam Leavitt being able to get ASU to where he got them last year is from the start of the year to the end of the year, he was a completely different quarterback. I remember the first month of the year, I was watching Sam Leavitt and I was like, okay, well, you see what's there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if things are going to click right now. One of the things that I had really put an emphasis on when I was watching him was, when are we going to see the deep ball start to come together for ASU? They haven't had that in several years. That's something that really helps the offense out. And you didn't see that over the first month. So I kind of wrote it off. I said, he's a redshirt freshman. He's probably not going to be there this year. This, that, and the other. But by the end of the year, all the coaching had really started to sink in, and his connection with Jordan Tyson really just took 4 or 5 steps forward. And all of a sudden, you see him turn into what people believe is a potential first-round talent of a quarterback that is just able to attack all 3 levels of the field, hit that deep ball that I had questions about, and just look so much more confident entirely. And then is able to do so much good that by the end of the year, you go on a run and you go to the college football playoff, you win the Big 12 championship game. And Cam Scadaboo was so good that a lot of people don't realize how great Sam Leavitt was in that stretch of time as well. So it was remarkable that he was able to do what he did. And so many things just ended up lining up for him. So for BYU to find that same success with their quarterback now, it's going to be a lot of patience and making sure that the coaching is going to fall in line for him so that he will be able to find the most direct, straight path forward to having that success. But it may take a little bit for everything to click, because I just didn't think that was going to be there for Sam. I thought we were going to get good play from him. Never would have imagined that he would take the drastic step forward that he did.
Okay, and that brings up another point here, because you mentioned Cam Scadaboo. He was, from my vantage point, the heart and soul of Arizona State last year. And that a strong running game is a first-time starting quarterback's best friend. And BYU thinks that LJ Martin is poised for a breakout year this year and could be one of the top backs in the Big 12. And that's kind of lending, I think, some credence to why this could be the parallel of 2024 for ASU with BYU in 2025, where you have a very strong running game headlined by one of the best backs in the league. I know that Scadaboo was far and away the best back, and there was strong class of running backs last year in the Big 12 conference. But that would allow, I think, that grace period, I guess is the best way to term it, for a guy like Bear Bachmeier to settle in. And as you point out, there may be some early foibles, some struggles, may not be able to connect on all the routes and passes you want early on. But the hope is, you said, the coaching. Kenny Dillingham did a great job with Sam Leavitt. The hope is that Aaron Roderick and Matt Mitchell, is the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach here in Provo, they can obviously work their magic with Bear Bachmeier. And then, maybe by the end of the season, things are clicking and you start to see a quarterback emerge that can really be a big part of the future for BYU, a la Sam Leavitt for ASU.
That's what BYU really needs this year too, is you lose Jake Retzloff, and there's a lot of questions that now come with the quarterback position. And I know that Retzloff wasn't an elite quarterback, but he was still a plus quarterback for the team. And losing that is what dropped BYU from being one of the beloved darlings of the Big 12 for contenders to win the conference to probably about the middle of the pack. I'm not sure if that's the same sentiment that BYU fans have, but I definitely feel like they definitely dropped at least one step below some of the other teams in the conference because Retzloff is gone. So if you say Bachmeier is how you pronounce it? So if Bachmeier is able to even just play slightly as well as Jake Retzloff was, I mean, that's still a really good BYU team that still has a lot of very, very good football players on it. They're very well coached, and they've got one of the best home field environments that you can ask for. And it's hard to win in Provo, and that's a lot of games that you can add to the win column if that goes right. So having him being able to get to a point where he is comfortable understanding everything is going to help get BYU back on track to where a lot of people previously had them as, which was a contender to win the Big 12 conference. It went from like, hey, this is a team that should win 10 games to 7 wins, maybe 8 wins. If you have that quarterback, that concern that a lot of people had, probably people outside of Provo, majority of them, that might be able to just kind of go away, and then we'll see BYU pop right back up into conversations for a wide open Big 12.
Now, the other thing I want to ask you about before we move on to another topic, we'll talk about NIL momentarily, and I want to dig into that. But I also want to get your thought on this. You mentioned the fact there was a progression like month to month to month last year because ASU came on strong in the back half of the season, and that propelled them to that Big 12 title game, winning the Big 12 championship, and ultimately come in within a pretty egregious non-targeting call of upsetting the Texas Longhorns. I don't want to rub salt in the wound because I thought it was absolutely egregious. But the point is, I think there is a chance that BYU, if Bear Bachmeier takes advantage of it, was a pretty soft first 6 games for BYU. They open up against the likes of Portland State, Stanford, who's in full rebuild mode. They go to East Carolina, and then the first 3 Big 12 games are Colorado, West Virginia, and Arizona, Richie. There should be an opportunity for a guy like Bear Bachmeier, if he is indeed the guy, to settle in here and hopefully show that progression before you get to that Utah game in Game 7 when it kicks off kind of the tougher part of the schedule. And hopefully by then he's settled in and capable of leading BYU a little more than maybe he is right out of the chute.
Well, dare I say, you may be able to have him give you just enough on the field. Don't turn the ball over, be productive, be able to lead drives, stuff like that. And I'm not saying BYU is 6-0, but that is certainly a schedule that a team that played to BYU's potential last year could go 6-0. And that would allow a bit of a softer start, with no offense to the other teams that are there. They're just not at the caliber that BYU is at, to where Bachmeier could be able to experience necessary growing pains, but not have to worry about that being something that completely derails the season for him. So, I mean, if you're looking for a start to a potential career as the BYU starting quarterback, then that seems like a pretty ideal one. You get him comfortable, get the jitters out of him over the first half of the year. Maybe BYU goes 4-2 or 5-1. And then the back half of the year, which I know you guys have some heavyweight teams to play, that's where Bachmeier may be able to step up and say, yeah, I got 6 games, I got 7 games, 8 games under my belt. I feel like I can do more than I would have been able to against East Carolina.
Yeah, we'll see how it all goes. All right, coming up next, I want to talk about a bit of a contrasting style. Now, both Arizona State and BYU are very intent on being players when it comes to NIL. I know there's a new era of NIL with the house settlement and the like, but it's still absolutely a factor for both of these programs as they try and kind of find their way to the top of the Big 12 and remain in the mix. And we're going to dig more into that because I'm very intrigued with the way that Kenny Dillingham approaches things, Richie, versus how Kalani Sitake approaches it. And we'll delve into that next as we continue on with this crossover edition of Locked On Cougars and Locked On Sun Devils. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Of course, August 26th is officially a FanDuel Futures Day. It's a brand new holiday for all of you out there in the sports betting space. The best part about this is, Richie, it is a chance for you guys to make bold predictions and capitalize on your preseason hunches. I know you've probably got some thoughts about how ASU is going to do in their follow-up to their Big 12 campaign last year. I've got thoughts on how BYU does some things as well. The best part about it with FanDuel is for 24 hours, they're giving you deals on NFL season predictions, whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week one even kicks off. This is your moment. I know, Richie, you're a Ravens fan. You're going to capitalize on this?
I'm certainly hoping so. This, dare I say, this feels like our year.
I've got some hope that the Niners, I'm a Niners guy on the flip side, can bounce back. But the best part is you can capitalize on all of it. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now because because Futures Day with our friends at FanDuel is one day and one day only. Check them out today. That's FanDuel, is where you can always play your game. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars and Locked On Sun Devils your first listen of the day. Jake Hatch, Richie Bradshaw along for the ride here. All right, Richie. So I'm obviously up here in Utah, but I do keep tabs on ASU down there in the Valley. And one of my favorite things about the way that Kenny Dillingham approaches his coaching style is he wants nothing more than the best for his football players. And he is absolutely unabashed. Every time it seems like he opens his mouth to talk about his players, he's encouraging ASU fans to donate to the collectives. I think, is it the Sun Angel Collective is the main one for the university? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing I love about it is he wants to make sure that NIL is at the forefront of everybody's minds, because it really is the forefront of a lot of these players' minds in many respects, because they're wondering, okay, how much money can I get? Where can I get it? And I think Kenny Dillingham, much like Kalani Sitake at BYU, he wants to make it as advantageous for these players to remain where they're at or pick ASU or BYU in this respect. But it's a different style because Kalani Sitake is not out as much as a guy like Kenny Dillingham is, and saying, hey, donate to the Royal Blue Collective, which is BYU's endorsed collective up here in Utah. But what do you make of that? What do you make of the way that Kenny Dillingham approaches all this?
Well, unfortunately for ASU, it's almost out of necessity that Kenny Dillingham has to be as proactive as he is, to a point where I know a lot of people have seen it as like, wow, it feels like all he cares about is money and this, that, and the other. And I've seen that, and I'm like, well, that's not the whole scope of things. Because I sit there, I'm like, do you like winning? Because if you like winning, right now it's pay to win. And should it be that way? No. But that's the way that the current landscape of college football is. Now, we'll have to see how things settle over the next few years with the House settlement coming in and all that good stuff to hopefully try and even the playing field. But ASU is just a volatile team in the sense that, as I've said many a times before, there's so much to do in Phoenix. It's one of the biggest metropolitan cities in the country. You are a 2-hour drive away from Flagstaff. So if you want to get out of the heat and go hang out with the snow, you can go a little further and go to Snowball. You are like a 5-6 hour drive away from Rocky Point. Las Vegas is 4 hours away. San Diego is about 4 or 5 hours away. You got tons of golf courses. It's good weather for 8 months out of the year, as long as you can get past triple digits. There is a ton to do. So if you don't put a good product on the football field, I am not paying money to go see it.
Okay.
There's just better things I can do. So when you have a team that capitalizes on what they did last year and caught everyone off guard, okay, well, now's the time to get everyone in, because as Arizona Cardinal fans can tell you, and certainly recently as Phoenix Suns fans can tell you, when your team is good, you got a loyal fan base. It was very difficult to get yourself a ticket to back then the Footprint Arena for the Phoenix Suns. I'm not sure what it is now. I feel like it changes every 6 months, but they were like the ticket to see. Everyone wanted to go see a good basketball team. 10 years prior to that, I remember some people were like, you couldn't pay me to go see a game because I don't want to pay the parking to go to the game. Like, it's difficult to have Arizona sports fans consistently be able to be dialed in to this program because of how much there is to do. I'm not saying it's right. I certainly lean towards the other side of it, but that's just the situation that ASU and really just Valley sports tend to face. Is if you're not good, you're not going to really get the support. We saw at the end of the year that ASU was having true sellouts, not the pseudo like, hey, all the seats are sold and they're still chunk up in the rafters and aren't there. They had true sellouts by the end of the year. BYU was a true sellout because they had something worth seeing. ASU is trying to make sure that they can make that a thing going forward. Kenny Dillingham is being so proactive about it because ASU could lose it like that. Now, if they sustain the success for a handful of years, that's not going to be as difficult. But you're trying to prove you're not a Cinderella team right now, even to your own fans.
Well, and that kind of is where I think BYU, in their respect, BYU behind the scenes is encouraging everybody who's interested in BYU athletics to contribute. I just don't think that Kalani Sitake either feels a need or feels it's appropriate, I guess, in a way, because this is a church. This is a church school, and it almost feels like you're pandering to a religion type element when you're saying, hey, give us money, give us money. But we had a BYU administrator on my radio station up here in Salt Lake City, Robbie Bosco. Funny enough, he's the quarterback who led BYU to that national championship back in 1984. He's now a fundraiser for the athletic department. And his point was, Richie, more often than not, we're hitting up the same people time and time again saying, hey, we need more money. That's just a simple fact of life. I think it's the same thing down at ASU that these fundraisers are having to go back to the same well time and time again. And the concern that Robbie had, and he expressed it, is that, hey, we don't want to ruin relationships over hitting these people up for money time after time. So we have to, as you mentioned, A, put a good product on the field, but also B, make sure we have a true relationship with these high level boosters who have got these hopefully infinitely deep pockets that can contribute, in this case, to ASU or BYU. And I think that's where the contrast comes in, where BYU absolutely is hounding money wherever they can get it from. They're just not out in front as a guy like Kenny Dillingham has been in terms of when he speaks to the media. Hey, make sure you contribute to the Sun Angel Collective.
Yeah, and it's just such a different atmosphere that you have because, like you said, BYU is backed by the I don't want to say backed by the church, but
Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. There you go.
Right. It's a religious institute, so there's a lot of different financial revenue streams that go to the university that are very different from a public university like Arizona State or a private university like Texas A&M, who is also just very well funded all the time. So BYU, I agree with you that it would feel almost pandering if Kalani Sitake was coming out after every BYU practice and doing what Kenny Dillingham was doing, and it would come across very differently to BYU fans and supporters and members of the church compared to how it looks for ASU fans and former alumni and stuff like that. And again, there's already some people who don't like that Kenny's doing it, but it's like he's doing what he has to do. Yeah. It's adapt or die in sports, and that's the way that college sports are right now, not just college football. So the thing that ASU needs to be able to find a way to surface this is there are several boosters within the Valley that have those deep pockets that ASU is looking to obtain. And you're still having to sell yourself to them right now. But BYU has so much great funding behind them. You have the owner of the Utah. Did they settle on the Yeti, right?
The Jazz and the Mammoth. That's what it was, the Mammoth.
The Mammoth. That's right. Yeah. So you got there. That's a good revenue stream there. Mm-hmm. Texas Tech has their oil money. I don't know if you saw, Kansas just got a $500 million donation from one of their alumni. Houston's got good money. Like there are boosters for ASU at that level. Just haven't been able to find them yet. And if they are able to get their attention and wake them up and say, "Hey, we got something going on here. And if you like what you're seeing, we can keep this thing going, and we can keep this thing going for a while." It's just a matter of getting to that point. So I think that's another really interesting thing, is just how different the circumstances are for ASU looking to get money compared to if Kenny Dillingham was at BYU and was doing the same thing. It is a very different scope, and it's fascinating. It truly is.
Yeah, there's no right way to go about it, but the simple fact of life is you got to somehow find $20.5 million and distribute it, and that money doesn't grow on trees. Let's just be very blunt about it, Richie. All right,
yeah.
So, it's a crazy time, obviously, in college athletics, but it's also pretty topsy-turvy in the Big 12 conference. And Richie and I, we've got thoughts on what we think the league's going to do this year. And, the season's not far off. So we're going to kind of delve into it and kind of give our picks for who we think is going to settle atop the Big 12. And I got a thought that Richie probably, I think we know where he's going with his favorite, but we'll get to that next right here on Locked On Cougars and Locked On Sun Devils. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Wayfair. Now, as the summer winds down, school just started back up here in Utah. There's something about getting back into a routine that you love. And with Wayfair, it's easy to set yourself up for the season ahead. The best part is, from bedding to linens to storage solutions for every room, Wayfair is your one-stop shop to refresh your home. And the best part is, no matter what you need out there in the world, quite literally, Wayfair has got options for you. Richie, I know that you've looked at Wayfair, and it just feels like there's an infinite amount of options they've got to offer you.
Yeah. And as someone who, when I first got into my home, I had a lot of hand-me-downs, like a lot of furniture that was not mine. So, yep, high five on that. Wayfair is where I'm looking for myself right now, to be able to get my own furniture and stuff that matches my style. That's what Wayfair does for you, man.
Yeah, it's the perfect time to get your home ready, obviously, whether it's organizing, upgrading your workspace, or making weeknight dinners easier, or really anything else. Wayfair is the place to get organized, refresh, and get your routine back in place for way less. Head to wayfair.com right now and shop all the things that they have for you guys. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style and every home. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars and Locked On Sun Devils your first listen of the day. All right, Richie Bradshaw, I'm Jake Hatch. Let's talk about the Big 12 season ahead, because you and I have teams last year that were picked 14th in my case and 16th respectively in the preseason poll. I think the simple fact that these two finished near the top, and in the case of Arizona State, atop the conference, that's why we don't have a preseason poll in the Big 12 conference anymore.
Yep. How great is that, man? They're like, well, we're not getting our pants caught between us again. Like, it just makes me think of that Paul Rudd meme where it's like, look at us. Who would have thought? Not me. That's ASU and BYU. Look at us.
That's the
front of this conference.
That is the perfect meme. There's no doubt about it. So I think we're all expecting the Big 12 is going to be topsy-turvy once again this year. And it does feel like there are some heavy hitters. And I would say I'm hard-pressed to pick anybody other than ASU to repeat as champions. I just think the weapons that ASU returns, even though they don't have Cam Scadaboo, I still think the Sun Devils are poised to repeat as Big 12 champs. But this is a league, as we have learned, that can seem to flip itself overnight into something completely new. What do you just give me an overall view of how you project the season ahead here, Richie?
I have been stuck between three teams to contend with ASU the most. I am taking ASU to repeat. Obviously, there's a huge bias that I have, not just as Locked On Sun Devils, but as someone who went to the university, someone who grew up a fan and everything. Yeah, of course there's that bias. But I also look and I go, that's the second most returning production in the country. That is a defense that is returning almost every starter. That is an offense that has a Heisman Trophy candidate in Sam Leavitt and a Bolitnikov Trophy candidate in Jordan Tyson. There's a lot of NFL talent, and the entire coaching staff is back. Yeah, I feel pretty good about that team to repeat. But there's so much parity in the Big 12, and I love it, because that's what made the Big 12 so great last year. Who were supposed to be our big contenders? Utah, Kansas, Oklahoma State. None of them were good.
Kansas State was also in that mix, and they were the best of the bunch.
Yeah.
Middle tier.
Yep. And I mean, it's what's beautiful about college football. And, the rest of the nation hates it because we don't have an Ohio State or an Alabama, but we don't really want it that way because ASU could finish 6th place in the conference this year. And that would just feel very on par with what this conference is about. But there's 3 teams that I've had my eye on in no particular order: Texas Tech, Baylor, and Kansas State. Kansas State is just contenders every year in the Big 12. I will respect them until they prove not to be. And Chris Kleiman is still working with Avery Johnson. They should feel good about that. Texas Tech, they are the paper champions. They spent a lot of money. They brought in a very talented team. That is not always going to work out. And until we see on the field how that new defensive line and offensive line and all the weapons that have been assembled around Barrett Morton, how we see that works out, I just can't get there as the champions the way that some other Locked On college football hosts, specifically the one and only Spencer Glodlin, seems to love the Texas Tech Red Raiders. I do like them. I'm wait and see mode. And then with Baylor, I've been on them since like January, and I feel really good about them being dynamic. They could have the best offense in the Big 12, would not surprise me. But BYU was right there for me until Retzloff was gone. And if Bachmeier, right, I'm going to have to do some practicing for myself to get him into my repetition. If he does end up playing the way that you guys are hoping he does, and if he does maximize the schedule the way that he does, get the bumps out of the way early before a brutal stretch, I mean, BYU could be as battle-tested as possible by the end of the season if they do get to the Big 12 championship game. And ASU won't play them this year. So this would be a heck of a rematch in Arlington with 2 teams that would be going through the gauntlet. ASU's got some tough games this year too.
And that to your point, you mentioned the fact that for ASU, you said you've got essentially BYU has everything. And I'm not saying that Chase Roberts is Jordan Tyson, vice versa, but you look at what BYU returns. They return their 2-star linebackers, Isaiah Glasser and Jack Kelly, who I think are bona fide NFL draft prospects. The defensive secondary looks very strong. They reloaded on the defensive and offensive lines and feel like they're very strong there. There's a lot of parallels between ASU and BYU, and the only thing that holds me back from establishing BYU back into I guess you'd call it a dark horse contender tier, is the QB play. And that's understandable because when you had Retzloff, obviously you're expecting him to take another step and lead BYU to glory, much like Sam Leavitt this year for ASU. But if they can, as you mentioned, get that quarterback play from Bear Bachmeier, that could establish themselves as a team by the end of the season that becomes a force. Now, if the league is as crazy as it was a season ago, where we had 6 or 7 teams going into the final week of the regular season with a chance to go to Arlington, and you're within a game of each other. That's the hope for BYU, is that they just kind of stay right there in the mix. And if it gets crazy, but I'm with you. I think your contenders that you've mentioned, they're the ones that I would have on the list as well. And I would include, if you wanted a dark horse in my mind, you'd have to include the Kansas Jayhawks. It feels like I just think with Jalen Daniels, he is a really, really dynamic player. And what we've seen from Kansas under this new coaching staff over the last 4 or 5 years is they have become a whole new program. And I've got an eye on Kansas just to see what they do. But you're right. Texas Tech, is it all going to come together? Baylor, can Dave Aranda get things back on track, particularly on defense? They've got maybe the best quarterback in the league outside of Sam Leavitt and Robertson. But there's so many different teams here that have different intriguing qualities about them. And Iowa State with Rocco Becht. And you know what? I can't even ignore my arch rival, the University of Utah. I know you as a Sun Devil, you're okay with it. But I'm just saying, if Jason Beck gets an offense that's functional, Kyle Whittingham and the Utes are going to be right back in it. That's half the league we just mentioned right there, Richie, that has something intriguing about them. And that's what makes this league so much fun.
It does. And I think I just heard Parker Ainsworth pounding on the door to try and get in here and tell us about how Connor Wegman is going to get Houston to 9 wins this year. But it's beautiful, and I love it. And that's what makes college football beautiful. Not having the same teams every year that are representing your conference. I come from the Pac-12 where USC every year was supposed to be that team, and then Washington came in for no reason. And then Utah had consecutive years winning the conference, and Stanford was like blue blood of the Pac-12 for a while, RIP. It's something that I've always loved. And getting to the Big 12 and seeing that it's the same thing, I'm just like, sweet, I'm here for it. Like, I could see ASU repeating again. That's definitely where I lean. But not even because I think ASU will be bad this year, because I just don't see a scenario where they are. But there's so many other good teams in the Big 12 that ASU could finish 4th, 5th, or 6th, depending on the way that the other teams end up working out. Maybe Texas Tech ends up just everything clicks. Maybe Iowa State, who we didn't talk enough about on this show, mainly because, we got a lot of stuff to talk about in the Big 12. Maybe they end up being just fine replacing their receivers with Rocco Becht and having a defense that still has a really good secondary come together. Like, there's so many different ways that the Big 12 could shake out this year. The ASU could be the number 1 seed going into the Big 12 title game, or they could be outside the top 5. Would not surprise me. BYU could find themselves inside that top 3, depending on how the season goes for them, because they have such a brutal end to the year. They could have some very quality wins to be able to have them up there, or they could be, a 7-8 win team that would put them 6th, 7th place in the Big 12. It's beautiful, at least to me and some other sickos in the Big 12. I know the people who love smelling their own farts down in the SEC are not fans, but it does mean something different, I suppose.
It does. Well, okay, I guess the last thing here is I think we're both hoping we want to see multiple Big 12 teams make the college football playoff, and that will require, it feels like, 1 or 2 of them to pull away from the pack and finish with 10 or at least 11 wins potentially. But you know what? If it also comes with some chaos along the way, I don't think either of us will be complaining either.
Nope. Just give me the chaos. I thrive off of it. I love it. It's what college football's about.
All right, Richie, where can everybody, if a BYU fan wants to learn more about the Sun Devils, where can they find you?
If you want a view behind enemy lines, you can find me on Twitter at Richie Brads36. That's Brads with a Z. The Locked On Sun Devils podcast is free and available on all platforms, audio and YouTube. Come hit me up. I'm always down to talk ball, and I'm certainly down to talk a little bit of smack.
All right, you can find me if you're an ASU fan. There's a lot of members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints down there who are ASU and BYU fans. If you want to feel for the Cougars every single day, make sure you check out Locked On Cougars. I am also on X, aka Twitter, at Jacob C. Hatch. Check it out, and obviously happy to, as Richie says, chop it up anytime y'all want. Make sure you subscribe, rate, and review these shows. And as always, thank you to all of you for being everydayers right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, and thank you for tuning in to Locked On Cougars and Locked On Sun Devils.